It is such a delight to have you on the show. I think anybody who is in the film business in any way, shape, or form knows Sundance, knows about the program, knows about the festival. But to be talking to someone who has been there since the inception of the Institute, since 1981, is really an honor. And so thank you for humoring me and my unsolicited request to have you on. But, one of the things that really inspires me about getting to do this show is capture the stories of the people who are sort of so important and integral to so many people's journeys, but are often behind the scenes. And I would venture to say, just looking at your very impressive, very long career, that you have had a hand in shepherding so many people that have gone on to become, I would venture to say, favorite filmmakers from so many people that are listening. So I would love for you to just take us to the beginning and just kind of tell us how you even discovered your love for film.
I would love to do that, but I'm also very honored to be with you this morning. I started in the performing arts,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and which was thrilling to be involved in producing live performances, and this was in the Boston area that I did that. But even before that, I grew up in a house surrounded by art. My dad was a visual artist, and we lived in a gallery of his work. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and I loved going. His studio was in our basement, and I loved as a little girl going into the basement and just sitting and watching him work. And he loved opera music and classical music, and very loud. It was an immersive space to be in, and you could smell, the smell of oil paints and turpentine was very strong. And he wasn't a big talker, um, but he was passionate about his art, and in those moments that we had, that I was, watching him work, listening, that was our connection. And it was a very strong connection that I had to him. And even in my home now, I'm surrounded by his art and a lot of art, which I love. So
Yeah, you have
that
some
was,
beautiful art behind you. For those who are
yeah.
listening, not watching, I recommend looking at her frame later.
Yeah, but I feel like I was weaned on the arts, and I studied dance, and starting with ballet, modern jazz, until I was around 14 and realized that I was never going to become the performer that I would have loved to be. So
What was your dream? What did you want to be, a prima ballerina?
well, I was probably a little bit more interested in modern and jazz, but I didn't have a flexible body. It was hard. It was too hard for me,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to make the commitment to it. But I loved watching performance, and specifically dance was my first love. And as a kid, I grew up in New Jersey, and as a kid, my mom would take me to New York, to Lincoln Center and City Center to go watch performances. I remember watching Alvin Ailey for the first time, and
Wow.
Judith Jamison perform in Revelations, and it was a revelation. Um, just gorgeous on the deepest level. So that was, those were early days, and of course going to the museums, and spending time with my dad. Again, very privileged in that way.
Yeah.
I got to I got to do that, and so when I got to Boston and finished college there, I saw a job that was this little clip in the papers for a job that was being I don't know if it was a coordinator, a program coordinator, for a small community arts organization in the Boston area. And I immediately, went for, that was like, okay, that's the job I want and the starting
Yeah.
point for me. And so I was there for a short amount of time. And then my colleagues there and I formed a nonprofit organization called Articulture. And from there, we started producing events, and they were all pretty much free. We did some indoor events in Boston. This was quite a long time ago, but it was, the opportunity to bring audiences together, to connect to the art of performance and each other. They were, it was really about community building as much as it was about,
Mm-hmm.
exposure, of the work, and did produce outdoors. I remember Alvin Ailey and Joffrey Ballet, and
Wow.
theater, and different, and lots of, and music. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it
So
sounds like it was a natural evolution then for you to sort of understand that there was this sort of producing kind of path one could take that seems like it was marriage of a lot of these skills that you had already been doing with like coordinating and community building and putting things together, events planning. Like there's so many of those skills that cross over into where it sounds like you went next. Was that a like a deliberate decision on your part, or would you say that that's just how things naturally unfolded for you?
it was a decision, on my
Hmm.
part, and I began going to see films, and I lived
Yeah.
down the street from the Orson Welles Cinema, which was this great, um, community space. Showed the what was called then the Janus Film Collection, which has become the Criterion Collection, and I just saw these amazing films, mainly foreign,
Interesting.
foreign language
Yeah.
films and directors. I remember seeing Breathless for the first time, Godard's film, and Jules and Jim. But it was a great film education. I would spend hours there, and I fell in love, with the immersive experience of film. Somehow it had, as much as I love dance and live performance, and I really do, there was this connection and this immersion, and this emotional resonance for me in watching movies that I didn't experience with the performing arts. I mean, it just transcended, for me, and that led me into wanting to work in film. And then I got really lucky, and I do, and I don't know if I even believe in luck. It's just the circumstances and the connections, and a very close friend of mine, who had moved out to LA. Sundance was forming, at that point. I mean, it was a very, I mean, early days. No festival, no labs, no anything except, a group of very committed artists and thought leaders, and visionaries, but led by the visionary Robert Redford, starting the Sundance
Yeah.
Institute. And I got brought in for the first lab, not for the amount of years that I've spent there, but but just to be, to support, this lab on the ground, to help to coordinate, the work going on.
And what was that first lab experience like for you back then?
uh, I will tell you, but one other quick thing is that I was brought in to help coordinate a weekend conference on exhibition marketing, and marketing of and distribution of specialized films. And that was really kind of the beginning. This was the early '80s, and it was the beginning of more regional films. There was John Sayles, doing his work, and Victor Nunez. So it was it's not that people weren't working before that, but, in film and creating more personal work, but it was that was more of a beginning or a continuation of that work, and this was about amplifying that work. So I was brought in to bring a group of with a committee that actually knew this area, which I didn't really. I mean, I came in with little experience, except experience in organizing and putting people together. So it was bringing in a group of people who were in these areas of distribution, and marketing, and doing that conference, which was in the middle of our director's lab, our first lab that we did. It was inspired chaos, but I fell in love day one. And just the mission of Sundance, being around artists, being in a creative space, being in a space um, where it was okay to fail, okay to make
Yeah.
mistakes. In fact, failure is just a step forward, in the work. Incredible collaboration, really amazing people there the first year. I remember Morgan Freeman and Eddie Almos and Sidney Pollack and this, just this great group of, artists coming together. So I said to myself, this is where I want to be. And I got to be there, which again has been, I have so much gratitude for that.
Yeah. And now you've been there 40 years. Is that math correct? About 40. When is it the anniversary?
Yeah, this year is our 40th anniversary.
What
Yeah,
month will it be?
in June.
In June.
Yeah,
So 40 years later, I mean, talk about, a happy marriage, right? We talk so much about that aligning yourself with the filmmaker is a marriage. And then you are doing that time and time again through the program. So clearly you've weathered the ups and downs of this marriage and you're still there 40 years later and you still love it. I mean, you're glowing just talking about it. And I find that so inspiring to see because I have not been exposed to Sundance, but it's become so big, right? But the mission of the festival, the mission of the labs hasn't really changed. And I think it's because of people like you on the inside who still hold on to that sense of integrity about what the program stands for and still bring that joy and that love to the work. And it shows, So how would you say that being on the inside for 40 years, have you seen this evolution of where things are today?
well, I've definitely seen the evolution, and been part of building that,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is something that I love doing. I think if I was doing the same job, I wouldn't be there for as long as I have. But
yeah,
it's really been a continuum and has evolved with listening and following artists and what they need, and also listening to the field, and where Sundance could make real impact, as an organization. And we're both about artist support and connecting artists with audience because that's equally important.
yeah,
The festival uh, was an existing festival in Utah Regional that we took over in 1984. Our first time out was in 1985. So, I look at all the programs that have been built, the amazing people that I've gotten to work with. It is truly a team effort. Um,
yeah,
and and that's been immensely satisfying. And I've learned along the way. I remember thinking, in the early days that, even the first lab, if I survive the first lab and help to create a conference that has some impact, on films, that would be a win for me.
yeah,
And you know, and now I've learned to embrace uncertainty, and because that's the world that we're living in, and the challenges, that we all face, and that artists face. So, but the other thing to know, and I think, and just in responding to also to your question, is we are very mission driven,
hmm,
and values driven, and our work in support of artists, our work in support of diversity, and inclusion in the stories that get told and who tells them is just so important, to us, and has been and will continue to be even more deeply important, to our work going forward. There's an idea around generosity, and I think that's the thing that that gives me, um, a lot of, pleasure and, sort of emotional resonance, is to be in a space that is, pure in its intent, and with a core value of generosity. The idea of giving back. That's where Robert Redford was in 1981, wanting to give back. And that is, the spark of, and community being the spark of, the Sundance Institute being formed at that time. So there have been difficult times. So I'm not here to say that it's
Yeah.
all been easy.
We'll talk
But
about that a little bit, because one of the things I love to talk about on the show are those hard times, and how you, as the woman that you are, have navigated that for yourself. Because I would imagine that being so entrenched in the work that you do for as long as you have, it informs a part of your identity to an extent, and you can't really separate one from the other. So how do you navigate that when things, you have those down slumps, when things aren't going right? Yeah, how do you fill your well?
well, I guess the one answer to that is there's a quote that had a that I connect to in a very strong way, which is it's actually a Winston Churchill quote, which is surprising to me. But I love I love it, and it's the way I probably look at the world and manage the ups and downs, which is that an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. So I'm always looking for what is the opportunity? What can I learn at this moment that will help me continue to, to do my job, not only do my job, but to, impact is really important for me. And that's another reason that I've stayed with the Institute. I can't think of any other role where I could have had as much impact on, on new voices and stories reaching audiences and stories changing people. So it, that's probably big, big to me in terms
Yeah.
of just a mindset. Um, there are times, I mean, honestly, where I'm stressed and exhausted, but the labs always give me life because there's something like so great to be in a generous space
Yeah.
that supports artists to be part of creation. When I think back to my early days with my dad, it was, I grew up around an artist and wanting to support, feeling that in a very visceral way, and thinking about what can I do to make an artist's work visible. What can I do to help an artist develop their work, connect them to audiences? So it's something
Yeah.
that I do think about. So it aligns very strongly with me.
Well, and I would say that anyone who gets into the labs brings a sense of enthusiasm and excitement, and just this stars in their eyes is such a big turning point for a lot of people's careers, that how can that energy not be infectious, right? And sort of like the stresses aside of the challenges, you really get to have that newness every time. I would imagine it's like the new freshman class coming in every year,
Yeah,
just bringing in all their hopes and dreams. And you're like, all
yeah,
right, guys, yes, but let's kind of like shape this into something, and I think what's important to highlight is that, which I want you to dig into a little more about, your work with the Sundance Film Institute, but just how you also have the international initiatives that you do across the world, and how much you oversee, how the sheer amount of talent that of artists that have crossed paths with you, whether or not they've been through the Institute. I don't even know what that volume would be, but you also help distribute over 400,000 annual grants to filmmakers. I mean, it's just a sheer it's an overwhelm. I mean, just to even read these numbers, it's overwhelming for me to even conceive. Yet you do it with such grace. And so talk a little bit about that whole side of it.
well, I would start by saying it's always a team effort. I don't do anything alone.
Yeah.
um, I I love leading, um, but I love to collaborate. And in everything that I'm doing, there's an incredible staff that I have the privilege to work with. Uh, our international work, I started. This was many years ago, and our first work, I think one of our first collaborations was in Japan, in Asia, with a group there, and taking the Sundance Festival to Japan,
Mm-hmm.
doing a portion of it there, and also supporting Japanese artists at our director's lab. So that was something that we did. I built or started the program. Again, there are people that led it after. I was the launch
Mm-hmm.
for a program, but working in the Middle East, in the MENA region, Latin America for a very long time, and that was a big focus of our work for really over 20 years in Mexico, in Cuba, in Chile, supporting artists there. We've also worked in other parts of Asia, and specifically in India, for over, 8 years there. So and that's been thrilling to work
Yeah.
there. So I would say that our labs are richer, our community, our support system, our festival has been enriched enormously by working with international artists. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's what Sundance can learn from artists who are working in other parts of the world, what they can learn to us. And one of the things with Sundance is we're never saying there's one way to do anything. There's no one right way. And what we're offering is opportunities to build skills, build craft, connect to audience, be a part of a world community. Let's take down the borders, uh, blur the lines, and
I love that.
bring us all together. Uh,
Yeah. I love that. So I want to talk about your eye for talent, because you've been referred to as, and I quote here, the sharpest eye and one of the most ear to the ground figures in the world of independent film. So, what is it that catches your eye on paper, on screen? What do you look for in emerging talent?
well, I start with looking for a voice, a perspective in storytelling. And that's really important. And it's hard to describe what that is,
Yeah,
but I
I
see
know.
it, I read it. It
Yeah.
captures me, and I always think about I want to support the stories that only you can tell. So what I mean is that it really it's not about autobiographical filmmaking, but something that comes from your perspective, your voice, your world, the characters that how you as a writer can step inside your work. So that's really important, and that's something I look for. I'm very interested in cinematic storytelling.
Yeah.
The people who can write dialogue I'm in awe of too. uh, and that's also important. When we do get down to final decisions,
Mhm.
in talking to artists, I'm really interested in hearing their connection to the story, their passion for telling that story, which is important, and their openness to a process, which doesn't mean that we're about giving notes and taking notes and stuff. It really is about being open to a dialogue about the work, and the rigor, which is so important because it is really hard. uh, the work of writing and directing and producing, it is
It's all a
really.
miracle. It's a
Yeah,
miracle anything gets done.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for somebody who's going to persevere and be rigorous, in the work. But of course, fresh perspectives are really important. Um, to me, it's feeling that in the work and in the characters' vulnerability, complexity, uh,
Yeah.
and that images that are indelible, that
Yeah.
that I've never seen before. So all those things is I do look for when I'm when I'm reading material or looking at a short or feature film, or whether it's in TV. I mean, all the disciplines that I do work in,
Yeah.
it's important to me. I'm more of, I mean, it's interesting because I am analytic, um, when giving feedback, but I'm very much a gut person too.
Yeah. That
And
seems to be a common thing. In a lot of people I talk to, there's a instinctual thing about what makes you be drawn to a certain type of work or a certain type of filmmaker that you can't quite explain. But once that instinct has kind of grabbed you, then you can lean on the analytical, like you're saying, and all of the actual knowledge that you bring to the table and structure and all of that to actually help shape and guide. But it has to start there. I think the people that are just, what is it that the market wants, let me write that, let me create that. I think it's a really hard road if that's what someone chooses to pursue, because I talk a lot about this on the show, and I really mean it, that the only thing we have is the journey. That's the only thing in our control. And so how you're going to show up for that journey is all you really have, because this, everything that comes after that is really not up to us. And so if you only get the one life, what kind of stories do you want to tell? What is that why? What is it that compels you that this must exist, period, full stop? And so I think that to me is always what I tell filmmakers and people coming up who come to me for advice, the little that I have to give, but is what's the why? Like, what is your why? Really
yeah,
looking at yourself, and usually when you boil it down to its most basic element, it is coming from a place of vulnerability, the why that they've decided to do X, Y, and Z. So I couldn't agree with you more. And you, yeah,
absolutely.
it's
We all,
wonderful to hear someone so more accomplished than me echo that, because I share that with a lot of up and coming people, and you've articulated it beautifully.
yeah, we often ask the question at, at the beginning of, just wanting to get to know somebody is, why this film? Why now? Why you? Um,
Yeah.
and there is, you also want to have some, it's not that every story has to have, urgency, and it depends on how, of course, you define urgency,
Mm.
but it is about, is it going to resonate now for audiences, is I think is an important thing. Even even historical films, what do they mean now? I recently watched, the United States versus Billie Holiday,
Mm.
and that's a historical, in a sense, biography, biopic, beautifully done, um, and exquisitely performed by Andra Day. But it so resonates right now. I'm an
Yeah.
emotional person, and I am also looking for, does something, open my heart and open my mind? Does it wake me up? And those are things that I can't explain, but but I love that feeling. That's the feeling of discovery and knowing that I am alive. And one more
Yeah.
thing I'll say is, it doesn't, in making decisions for our labs, it's not only about me. I'm looking for the team to, if somebody's, or several people are really excited about a project and I'm not as excited, that's great. It doesn't, I do believe in my taste and my instincts, but I'm also really open, because there are projects that we have supported, along the way, that I absolutely admire. Didn't speak to me personally, and that's okay. um,
Yeah.
I just admire the artistry and the craft, and the connection that they're bringing to telling the story.
Yeah. That's an important distinction for sure. Who are some of your greatest influences then? Who is there, a filmmaker or an artist, anyone that, like, when you are needing that hit of inspiration, that you circle back to, besides the Winston Churchill and his lovely quote?
There are so many, because I feel like I've learned from everyone. I haven't had like one single, singular mentor, but I've learned from everyone. That's just my way, because it's the thing that makes me
Thousands of
excited.
mentors. Yeah.
Um, but saying that, I mean, starting with Redford, and really learning from him, and and his curiosity, his connection, the questions he asks, the 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 input feedback that he gives on projects is can is often exquisite, and he comes from an actor, director, producer background, of course,
Hmm.
with films that I love. And I remember seeing Ordinary People, and
Oh,
it so spoke to me, um,
yeah.
in in a very emotional way, and seeing it several times, and each time seeing it through a different character.
Yeah.
Uh, his even All the President's Men, if that ever comes on TV, I start watching it and I can't stop.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would say him. Ryan Coogler. That was, supporting him on Fruitvale Station is
Yeah.
going to be one of the highlights of, of my career. And you know,
And why is that? What was it about it that stood out to you?
um, he was able to give humanity to a character, and a real life person, Oscar Grant, that was being erased, and that humanity that he brings to his that his filmmaking, um, and accessibility to to audience, and artistry, and and collaboration is something I truly admire. And I remember
Yeah.
seeing Fruitvale Station at our festival, and it won the award, the grand jury prize, and
Hmm.
I don't remember if it won the audience prize as well, but the grand jury prize, which is huge,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Sundance. But seeing the first, its premiere, for audiences, and the lights came on, and and everybody in the audience was incredibly moved and devastated,
Yeah.
by the story. And Oscar Grant's uncle stood up, in the audience, and Ryan was, of course, nervous. He had never, he hadn't shown this film,
Hmm.
to an audience, but his uncles, stood up and said, "You captured Oscar, and thank you." And I felt like, wow. And this film has gone on, I believe, to make change in the
That's
world.
beautiful. I'm getting emotional. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
So
why we do it, because it's so
yeah,
much work, but that's why we do it.
absolutely. And then
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson, who I met at, in his early 20s, and he had this incredible short film at the festival, and I just kind of fell in love with him, uh, in in a brief meeting we had, and we stayed in touch, and supporting him, his vision, his singular voice, and his ability to tell stories that, in a very specific way, with such artistry, um, and with bringing such humanity and humor, and darkness and complexity to his work. I
It's
love,
so
and all,
nuanced. So
yeah, so
nuanced.
nuanced.
Yeah.
And then one other person. Oh my God, there's so many people.
List them all. List them
I'm
all.
going to talk about two Joans. Joan Tewksbury, who's the writer of Nashville, among many other, films, and Joan Darling. He's a director and actor, and amazing person. And these two women, have been part of our labs for a long time, and they both lead workshops that are life changing, for the
Yeah.
artists that we support. And just watching them work and watching them listen, they have very different styles, but they are fantastic, in their work. And then I love Dee Reese, and Gina
Yeah.
Prince Bythewood, and Lulu Wang, and Rada Blank. I mean,
Oh, God. Like,
I know
just,
I can go on, and again, this is, this is where I feel again so privileged to have had this opportunity to work with these artists.
Yeah. And so every year you guys get so many new voices, new filmmakers with hopes and dreams applying to the different programs, to the festival. What is this? Is there a sort of not trend, but is there a commonality that you may be seeing from works that are coming in from the newer generation of filmmakers that maybe is different from what you've seen before?
That's a good question. There, it's interesting because the projects that we see, and sometimes that, whether it's at our, at our most recent festival, or the projects that we select for a lab, where, there is a process of, of making decisions along the way. So I'm seeing more of less of everything that's out there, and more of the projects at the, sort of that are rising,
Mm.
and and of that, what I love, and that we're seeing, is a lot of films that are about identity, which is, I think, such an important theme, which is about family,
Mm.
and and whether it's your own family, or what is family, and how how you create your own family. Um,
Yeah.
that I think that's a really important, important trend about, immigrant, families, and the difficulty, the challenges of what that, that is, and also that sense of hope and possibility. So it's also
Yeah.
about exposing, if the focus, which is our focus, and certainly my focus, is on exposing new voices, in an effort to uplift diverse voices, then I'm I'm looking at projects, and stories, again, that haven't been told before, but are about, about communities, and but we're also seeing, projects about, more, I think far more interesting people than, than in the past, where there is an attempt to, bring their essence to life,
Mm.
and that's, that I think is great to do. What is it that we can not only learn, but it's, it's about the untold stories, and I'm, really interested in that. There's always a lot of relationship stuff, and
Yeah.
and I love comedy, and I actually love silly comedy. Probably hard for anybody to believe that, but I do.
Have you seen Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar yet?
I have not.
The Kristen Wiig film on Amazon. It's
Yeah,
her
no.
follow up film with Annie Momo, her writing partner from Bridesmaids. If you love silly comedies, I highly recommend it.
It's that.
It is a delight. It is wacky, but somehow they still were able to have some grounded characters. I don't know how they
Yeah,
did it, but I just was transported to another really fun world. It felt like an escape, like you're inside a Lisa Frank
right.
uh, book or something. It's really fun, so I recommend.
I'm writing that down. I love Ted Lasso. That was
Yeah,
one of
Ted Lasso was really good.
one of my favorite series, and I've been watching a lot lately. That's the
Yeah.
other thing I do, is I end up watching a lot, read a lot. It is, look at look at performances online, and listen to podcasts, and I and again, I always think about, I get paid to do this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
To to really listen, and and also be able to, to grow what Sundance can do in support of artists that are working across all forms and across all platforms, and that's been exciting too.
Yeah. Yeah. For anyone who is listening, who may have ambitions who hears your story, hears the work that you get to do with Sundance, and says, I would love to one day carve out a career for myself that's like that. What advice would you give for them?
Well, I think it's being clear about your goals. That's a starting point, and and there's a lot of perseverance necessary, because it's not a straight line, and you learn from everything that you do. And the more, I do believe in networking. It's hard to do that online, but the opportunity to connect and meet people, because everything leads to something else. I mean, my my job, when I think about even Sundance, it came from, I mean, I had to walk through the door
Right.
and, um,
Right.
and do the work, because they weren't hiring me for any period of time except for a month. So it requires you to be world class in whatever that you do. Um, and know that every opportunity you get to meet somebody new, or do a job that may not be the job that you want to be doing, there's something there. Find the something there where
Mm,
you can excel, and make a difference.
yeah.
You also have to think about, because my world has been and always has been the nonprofit world, and I was more interested in impact than I was in, sort of a certain kind of a job where you get to read a lot of material, but a lot of things don't get made. Um,
Right.
so it's also finding the right people to work with. I think the work culture is so important. It's being able to also take an idea and build it, lead it,
Yeah.
bring people in, bring community in. You don't have to do anything alone. There's a lot of opportunity. It's not easy. um,
Yeah.
and and you have to figure out how to support yourself, um, and also do the work. But if but I do believe in that you can manifest certain things, um, and that it's a better time, even with the pandemic. It's a better time, for and for women, and whether it's BIPOC artists or executives,
Hmm.
or artists, who want to create work, that I feel like more people are listening and want to support. And I may be just talking from my own, and from my own
Yeah.
place.
No, I
Um,
think you're right. I think it's never been a better time to be a woman or to be a person of color in our business. And like you said, there's a challenge, but where's the opportunity in the challenge? And I do believe if there's any industry that's able to pivot and thrive in chaos and find new ways forward, it's ours, because we have to do it in tiny ways and big ways every day.
Yeah, yeah. I heard a quote from somebody recently, which I kind of loved, because there's always this question: can films change the world? Right? What's the impact of films? And somebody said, films change people. People can change the world. And I thought, yeah, that
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And I would add to that, that films and art is the ultimate act of community service, because so much of our identity is formed in our initial images that we see and the books that we read, and it sets us on a certain course. And so, myself included, the amount of coming to this country at 9 years old and learning English, watching sitcoms, and finding myself in those characters and always in the fish out of water character. It's no wonder now I gravitate to fish out of water stories, because it's so similar to my own through line. So I would say it's massively important, and it gives us a safe way to experience someone else's reality, in a way that can like awaken us to widen the scope of our own world and our own frame of reference and our own frame of suffering, honestly, to kind of step into someone else's narrative. I don't know of any other way you can do that. And so I'm a big proponent for it. I think yeah, I agree with 100% with what you said. I think without it, I mean, I've read this once that, the only reason that that humans survived when, during the evolution, is because of our ability to tell stories. that is how our brains evolved, and our tribal sort of feeling all comes from that. And so I think if we lost that ability, I don't know, we would just become robots. I feel we need it. We need it. It's
Yeah,
good for our soul.
I totally agree. And it's the way we not only make sense of the world, um, it's the way we connect to other human beings. It's,
Yeah.
connect to our common humanity. um,
Yeah.
and and storytelling and being in the business of storytelling, again, across forms, and platforms, you know is, I feel, such an important part of how the world will continue to evolve.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a privilege and an honor to get
Yeah,
to be a storyteller, to get to be a part of shaping that conversation globally. It's one that I don't take lightly. I don't take myself too seriously, but I take the work seriously. It's kind of, I always try to have fun with it, but it's never lost on me that I am very privileged to get to do what I get to do, especially when I think about my own journey and how it's, unfolded to get me here. And so, gosh darn it, I want to be a part of creating something great and helping people achieve greatness for themselves as well.
yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And that I want to talk about one quick thing, which is 2 years ago, I was involved in creating Sundance Collab, and I just want
Yes.
your
Talk
audience
about
to
that. Please,
know,
please, yes, tell us.
yeah, know about that. And this was an opportunity to build our digital future and to open access to Sundance learning, and community, for global creators. And it's, you can register for free. So much of it is free online at Sundance Collab. And it's and I'm so proud of it. And again, a major team effort. Um, but here's something to also think about. Is we at Sundance has been talking about it, about we need to do it, education online in some way. What are we going to do? So there was a lot of talk, and I finally said, I'll do it. Let me try. and and I, with all the trepidation on whether anybody, it's like, if you build it, will anybody come,
Mm,
do it, and brought on a great partner, and a woman named Tara Hine Phillips, and also we built this incredible team. But we, now offer courses in writing and directing and producing, and documentary filmmaking, and we're going to start with, do podcasting coming up. There's a lot going on, a lot of opportunity to learn, and to be, part of a bigger community and get to share your work and get feedback and stuff. But this was, the kind of beginning of creating, the digital future for Sundance around
yeah.
learning, which was, the beginning of our work.
Yeah.
And the festival became, a digital model for engaging audiences, which is fantastic. And we're looking at unifying, all our work,
Yeah.
um, online, of course, continue to gather people and in person as well.
Right.
um, but to, open that kind of access to, artists and creators and executives from all over the world.
Yeah, it's very full circle, and I will absolutely link in the show notes to the program, to Sundance
Yeah.
Collab, so everybody listening can check it out.
The only thing I'd like to talk about is our work across disciplines, and I think it's important to know. And this is some of the work that I've been doing, in creating the episodic program,
Yeah,
and working right now with our interdisciplinary program, which supports artists across film, music, what we call new frontier, emerging media, and theater, and and our work, of course, in feature film and shorts, and really looking, and now podcasting, and looking at how storytelling is evolving, and and audiences are engaging with it in so many different ways. And so Sundance is, and my work has been, sort of keeping up with, with an evolving ecosystem, and being able to create opportunities for, for artists to learn and grow, and be part of the community. So that's some of the other work that I've been doing.
Yeah, and it's art of all kind. What I love about Sundance is that you guys are always have a finger on the pulse of what is going on, all the different ways that someone would want to express themselves. I remember getting to see, when I went years ago, I actually volunteered. My very first Sundance, I was a volunteer part-time, and, got to go to the New Frontier Labs and got to see some of the incredible work that people were creating that at that time, for me, it's like I never had been exposed to act. I had never had access to seeing that kind of stuff. And it just blew my mind that it was a sidestep from what most people think of when they think of the festival and the incredible films that you get to see and the panels and all of that. But it was just like this other world that there's, when you zoom out, there's just so much that Sundance offers, that there's truly anything for everybody, whatever discipline you want, whatever interest you have. Like, I bet you can find it there. And if you can't, well, Michelle will create it.
I don't know about that, but
Michelle and her incredible team will find a way to pivot there, to capture that. So it's truly remarkable, that Sundance has withstood the test of time to still be an institution and an institute that, like you said, it really is all about mission and values, and just the amount of people that have come out of there that have gone on to have incredible careers. It's really inspiring. It's wonderful to still have a place like that, no matter how big the festival gets, and that still, rewards these first-time filmmakers who have, like you said, a voice and a vision, and are able to somehow express that and bring it to form. It's such hard work, but such important work across the board. So before I let you go, I just want to thank you and your team and everybody at Sundance for the incredible work that you guys do to help uplift stories and filmmakers, diverse voices especially, and amplify the lesser known stories that sometimes don't get to see the light of day. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to do the lightning round?
Yeah, let's do this lightning round. Okay. So it's 5 fun little questions. Let's see how this goes. Okay. First question. What's a song that teleports you to a happy place?
The song is Glory. And this is Common and John Legend.
Okay.
Writers, performers. It actually won an Academy Award.
Yeah.
And
for Selma.
It was a song of Selma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it really is about voice, and offering people a voice. And there's something about it, just speaks to my heart.
Yeah. What is the latest piece of art that moved you? It could be a book, film, show, theater, anything.
It was Amanda Gorman at the inauguration, and her poem, The Hill We Climb.
Yeah. That's a good one. Wow.
And I have so many, because again, I'm
you live and breathe this. So I'm, yeah.
But I can't stop thinking about it and reading it. It really is.
What a gift she is to our world.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Fill in the blank. When I'm overworked or overwhelmed, blank helps ease the stress.
I'm a walker. I love walking, and especially on the beach at low tide. That does it.
Awesome. What's one of the most worthwhile investments you've ever made? It doesn't have to be financial.
It's being a parent. I have 2 grown boys right now. They're amazing, and being a parent to them, and that, is quite, is always challenging, especially if you work, but learning from them, getting to know them, being there as, for them has been the best investment I've made.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so final question, and this borrows from Inside the Actor Studio, which is a show that I loved coming up. And his questions, the 10 questions that were inspired by the famed French journalist Bernard Pivot. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
This is a tough one. I have to say, I've been thinking about lately about artists, and so here's something. I'm going to add something else to it. Artists are essential, treasured workers. That's what I want. I actually want it on earth rather than heaven, uh,
Yeah.
for that to be our belief system,
Yeah.
and that in heaven all humans, or animals, have respect, dignity, and equity. That would be something that I would hope for. I also thought about, the idea of, we got to embrace our differences
Yeah.
and love our differences and
Yes.
find our commonalities.
Yeah.
And I know this sort of lives a little bit more in the political realm, and is not as personal. Of course, I'd want to be reunited with the people in my life that that have passed,
Yeah.
uh, and have that, a sense of, of play and connection and adventure. I mean, I don't know if heaven exists.
I
So
know. None of us do. It's just a fun
yeah. So
pontification
I want to, yeah, it's like I want to do what I can do on
on
earth.
Earth.
And,
Yeah.
and if yeah, I don't know what's next, but I have a lot more work to do, and I'm excited about it.
Well, I'm excited to watch from the sidelines and see what other incredible work you and the Sundance teams all do. So thank you again for taking the time out of your busy life to be on the show, to share a little bit of your wisdom with us, and a bit of your story and all of your incredible insights on the Sundance Institute and all the wonderful programs that you guys provide. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I've loved doing it, and it's been great to talk to you. A real
Yeah.
conversation. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.